Hey, what's going on, everybody? Commander Crane here, and we are back with another standard deck tech. I know we normally do a lot of Pioneer deck techs here on the channel. It's been a minute since we've done a standard one, but we have a spicy one today. Today, we're going to be talking about budget mono green monsters. I'm very excited to bring this list to you, but we have a couple things we got to go over before we hop into it here. So, huge shout out to Fards in the comment section, longtime viewer of the channel. Definitely not the first suggestion that they've done here on the channel. So thank you for recommending this style of deck. And again, if you have any suggestions that you'd like to see in upcoming videos, just let me know in the comment section, and I will highly consider those. A lot of the time I do get to those ideas that people would like to see. So okay, let's go and hop into the deck here. So essentially, we're a mono green monster deck, which for those who are unfamiliar with the term monsters, there's kind of like aggro, and then there's like the ramp, which goes like really big on like the X spells and such. And monsters is kind of right in the middle, where it's like that 4, 5, 6 drop kind of, selection for the most part. And the last thing I want to mention is we are a budget deck, so there's a lot of really good big creatures that are not featured in the deck, mostly because they're not super budget friendly, which we'll kind of get into at the end of the video, kind of if you're looking to upgrade the deck, what you could use to upgrade it. So, all right, let's go and hop into here. So, obviously, we're going to need some ramp for all of our big fatties, and this is at least our main ramp package we're playing. We're playing 4 copies of Bushwhack, 4 copies of Glimpse the Core, and 4 Topiary Stomper. So I really like Bushwhack just because obviously it's a fight spell, but also it's a Lay of the Land, help us grab a basic land, make sure we hit all of our lands on curve, which is really nice. Card's kind of fallen a little bit out of favor recently, but before, like the most recent standard set, this card was everywhere. So definitely a huge fan of Bushwhack. Glimpse of the Core is just really good because, 2 mana search for a forest, put on the battlefield tapped is incredible. Spoiler alert, we're not playing any caves in the deck, so we're not going to be returning any caves from the graveyard, but the card's still really good grabbing a forest and putting it on the battlefield tapped. And Topiary Stomper is obviously fantastic. It's probably the best ramp card in the entire metagame. Card's really good, searches for a basic land, which is always going to be a forest. And then if we get 7 or more lands, guess what? We can start attacking and blocking with it, which is pretty sweet. So definitely a big fan of Topiary Stomper as well. Next slide here. We have some of our early creatures. So we're playing 4 Llanowar Loam Speaker and 4 Bramble Familiar as our main mana dorks. Loam Speaker is pretty solid, being able to make a creature, land a 3/3 creature with haste until end of turn is pretty sweet. Don't be activating that ability a lot. If your opponent has open mana, I would be very careful, because if they have the opportunity to Stone Rain us, they're definitely going to do it. So just be careful with activating that ability. Obviously, if they're tapped out and you have some good attacks, obviously go for it. And you can only activate it as a sorcery, so you can't use them to block. So just keep that in mind. I'm a huge fan of Bramble Familiar. I really like this card. Obviously, you got the 2/2 for 2, taps for mana, you can return it to your hand, but you got the Fetch Quest, which is a really good late game option. You mill 7 cards, then put a creature, enchantment, or land from among the milled cards onto the battlefield. So it's kind of like a Turn Timber Symbiosis, for those who remember that land, or like a mini See the Unwritten. I really like this card. I think it is sweet. It's good early game and it's good late game. And we're going to go ahead and start talking about our fatties. We are playing 4 Colossal Rattleworm. So I finished this deck tech a while ago, at least compared to when I first, as when I'm recording this now, and I saw Colossal Rattleworm come out in the spoilers. So I knew I wanted to wait until after Thunder Junction to actually, put the deck together. So spoiler alert, this is the only Thunder Junction card that we're actually playing. And this card is really good. 6/5 for 4, has flash as long as you control a desert, has trample, and then for 1 and a green, we can exile it from our graveyard, search your library for a desert card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. So we are going to be playing some deserts in the deck to be able to get a little bit more synergy with the Colossal Rattleworm, which we'll talk about those once we get to the land section, kind of toward the middle of the video there. But I'm a huge fan of this card. It's a 6/5 trampling worm for 4. That alone is already really good. So definitely a huge fan of Colossal Rattleworm. All right, so now let's start getting into the big creatures, like the 5 and the 6 drops here. So as our main 5 drops, we're playing 3 Workshop Warchief and 2 Thrun Breaker of Silence. So Workshop Warchief obviously is kind of like a pseudo Thragtusk. When it enters, we gain the 3 life. When it dies, you make a 4/4 Rhino. You can also blitz it as well if you'd like to, which is pretty handy. Definitely a big fan of Workshop Warchief. It's great for 2 reasons. One, It's a solid creature. 5/3 gains 3 life when it dies, make a 4/4. Mono red hates this card, but it's also very, very budget friendly. It's only about 50 cents in terms of US dollars, so it's a good creature for the deck, and it's extremely budget friendly. And speaking of good creature and budget friendly, we're also playing 2 copies of Thrun Breaker of Silence. This card is really hard to get through. 5/5 for 5, can't be countered with trample, and it can't be the target of non-green spells your opponents control, or abilities from non-green sources your opponents control. And then as long as it's your turn, Thrun has Indestructible. So this card's very, very hard to get through. The only way to really efficiently kill this thing is essentially with like a Wrath, like a Farewell or something like that. And target removal doesn't kill it unless you're playing against like Golgari and they're playing Assassin's Trophy. So I mean, like that's about it. That's the only target removal spell in the entire game that'll actually kill this thing. So definitely a huge fan of Thrun, and once again, the card is extremely budget friendly for our deck. So our last slide we have to talk about for our creatures is what I would say is my favorite card in the deck. I really, really love this card. 4 Defiler of Vigor. 6/6 Trampler for 5. As an additional cost to cast green permanent spells, you may pay 2 life. Those spells cost green less to cast if you pay life this way. So, the thing I want to mention real quick, because a lot of people don't understand kind of this part of it. So, for instance, the card next to it, Tovolar's Huntmaster, is 4 green. That doesn't mean you can pay 10 life to just play Tovolar Huntmaster. What that means is you can pay 4 green and then a Phyrexian green, so a green mana or 2 life. I wanted to mention that, so, you know, you can't just pay, like, 6 mana and play, like, a triple green card, that kind of thing. I wanted to mention that. Not a lot of people understand the card, but it's still really, really good because it also says whenever you cast a green permanent spell, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So this really helps us get the game over with. It gets really, really big once we untap with it. We just start slamming a bunch of green permanents, and then it just gets really big, and all of our creatures get really, really big. Turns our mana dorks into, like, creatures that are able to really make an impact, and we quickly kill our opponents. So definitely a huge fan of Defiler of Vigor. And speaking of Tovolar's Huntmaster, we're also playing 3 copies of it. Not a card that most people really play for the most part in the format. I don't think I've ever seen Tovolar Huntmaster see any play in Standard, but I really, really do like this card. You know, 6/6 for 6, when enters you make 2 wolves, you know, you go a little bit of wide, you know, you go wide with it, make a couple other creatures, really good with Defiler of Vigor, just because, you know, when we cast more green permanent spells, we're going wide, so all of our creatures are getting bigger. And it also has the Night Side, which is pretty solid. So when it enters the battlefield on the Night Side or attacks, create 2 2/2 green wolf creature tokens, and then for 2 green, another wolf or werewolf you control fights target creature you don't control. So obviously we're not playing any other wolves or werewolves in the deck other than you know, the wolf tokens it makes and the Tovolar's Huntmaster or Pack Leader, but the card is still really good. Even if our opponent just Doomblades our Tovolar Huntmaster, we at least still get the 2 wolves. So definitely a huge fan of the card in general. So that's our entire main board except for the lands, and then we gotta talk about our sideboard as well as some budget options, which our lands are pretty easy. So these are the deserts that we're playing in the deck. We're playing 4 Conduit Pylons and 2 Sandstorm Verge. So there's not a lot of deserts right now in the format. The only deserts we have access to is literally the deserts from Thunder Junction, and this is the cards that I think are the best deserts to play. They come to play untapped. The Conduit Pylons I'd say is a little bit better, and that's why I'm playing 4 copies of it, just because you get the Surveil 1. We're not going to be activating Sandstorm Verge very often. When we do, it'll feel pretty solid, but it's not something we're going to be doing a lot. So we're only playing the 6 deserts. I thought about going full 8, but I want to make sure, you know, we have our green sources. It's really awkward if we get a hand where it's like 2 deserts or 3 deserts and like our hand is really good, because obviously we can't keep something like that. So I wanted to make sure we were playing enough green sources, and that's why we're just playing the 6 deserts. But I also wanted to play Field of Ruin. In the last slide here, we're playing 2 Field of Ruin and 16 forests. I really wanted to play Field of Ruin just to take care of those pesky manlands and such, just because they're everywhere in the format and we need to be able to take those out, especially for our mono green deck that doesn't play a ton of removal. And as our spicy basic land of the day, I'm playing the John Avon Forests from Double Masters. A huge fan of this artwork. I know this is not the first set it was featured in. I think the first one was it was the second unset, which I think was it was unglued, and so it should be unhinged, theoretically, was the first print of it. But definitely a huge fan of this basic land art. It's probably one of my favorite ones in the entire game. So let's go and hop into the sideboard here, which is really simple for the most part. So we're going to want some more bite spells. So we have Bushwhack in the main board as our fight spell, but we're also playing some hard-hitting questions. It's really good. It's a Rabid Bite that hits creatures and planeswalkers, which is very good. We're also playing Pick Your Poison. There's a lot of good artifacts and enchantments that we can hit in the metagame with Pick Your Poison. Occasionally you'll also hit some flyers as well, you know, maybe like a Archangel of Wrath or something like that, but definitely a huge fan of the card. Obstinate Baloth. I love Obstinate Baloth in this metagame. You know, with all these people playing like Liliana of the Veils, it's really, really good against that. It's also good against other aggro decks. A 4/4 for 4 that gains 4 is still really, really solid. So we're playing 4 copies of that. I would say that would be, I don't want to say the most sideboarded card in, but it's going to be the best feeling card that you're going to sideboard in for sure. And then we're also going to want a few protection spells. At least since we're playing on a budget, I would probably just play Royal Treatment because it also, you know, gives it hexproof until end of turn. Then it also gets the enchantment that gives it Ward 1, which is pretty sweet. You could also play Tyvar Sin if you have them laying around, but I know those are a couple bucks a piece. And we're trying to stay on, you know, a very, very solid budget here. So the last thing we have to talk about, you know, at least in regards to budget, is the upgrade options. Essentially what you would play if you're looking to upgrade the deck. So for lands, realistically, the only land is Boseiju. There's not really any other green lands that you'd be looking to also put in the deck. So the next thing I want to talk about is I put Titan of Industry / T-Rex as some of your green fatties that you can upgrade for the deck, which honestly with this deck, there's a lot of different creatures you could use. I know especially Thunder Junction just came out with a ton of awesome creatures. I know there's that Rhino that's like when a creature enters, it gets X counters where X is its power. So like every creature comes in with double power. There's also the really, really good Hydra for like green and X with it's like Vigilance, Trample, and Haste or something like that. There's a lot of really good fatties you can play in this deck. You know, all the ones that are in here are not like for sure you have to play this. If you have a couple of good green fatties that you want to play in the deck, just go ahead and slot them in. There's really nothing stopping you. We're playing a whole bunch of ramp, so it's not going to be hard for us to cast pretty much any of the creatures in our deck. And the last thing I want to mention is if you're really looking to upgrade the deck, I would personally consider maybe switching to Gruul Ramp. Obviously, you know, you get access to the dual lands and such like that to help cast your red spells, but then you also get like a Tali, which is one of the best things you can ramp to into the format. And just in general, there's a lot of really good Gruul creatures that you could ramp into, and you could even go like a Gruul Dinosaur ramp with it too. You know, like you could play, forgetting the name of it, like Trumpeting Carnosaur. Excuse me. But yeah, I get so emotional talking about dinosaurs. But yeah, you could play like Trumpeting Carnosaur and such like that. If you're looking to maybe, you know, play a more tuned list for like if you have an upcoming store championship or something like that coming up. Excuse me. And the last thing I want to mention is the current list, as it is right now, is only $37 US to build. This deck is extremely cheap. If you're looking for a fun aggro deck, or not even so much aggro deck, it's kind of an aggro deck, a monster deck at your local FNM, or you're looking to play with some friends, maybe build an extra green deck for, you know, when you bring your friend to FNM and they don't have a deck, and they have something to borrow, and it's just a bunch of big green creatures. You know, if you don't like casting big green creatures, man, I don't know. Like, it's one of the best things to do in the entire game, in my opinion. So that takes us to the end of the video here. Thanks so much for watching this video. Let me know in the comment section below, what do you think about the list? What do you like? What do you hate? What would you personally change? And if you have any suggestions for upcoming videos, just let me know in the comment section. I also forgot to put it on this video, but huge shout out to our channel members, Ralph and Matt. If you'd like to be a channel member, it's only $1 a month. You get access to the exclusive Discord as well as additional perks on the channel here. So consider being a channel member. So I'm Commander Crane. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll catch you in the next one.